Returning to our top story now, Ukrainian Independence Day and what could come next for Kyiv. Joining me in the studio is former Polish Prime Minister Krzysztof Bielecki. Good evening, sir.
Very good evening to you.
You were Prime Minister in 1991 when Poland became the first country to recognise Ukraine's independence. How severe is the threat to that independence right now at the hands of Russia?
Well, nobody expected at that time that the situation could turn so bad as we observe it today, and we are quite optimistic. It was up to the solidarity movement message that we should always support any nation standing for independence, and we are very proud of kind of a chain reaction we triggered in 1989 in order to bring democracy and market economy to the region. And of course, geopolitically, at that time was much easier. Soviet Union collapsed, so some former republics of the Soviet Union raised and also introduced democracy, parliamentary democracy. So at that time was really optimistic, and what I promised to at that time the spokesman of the Verkhovna Rada, the head of the Ukrainian parliament in January 1991, that as soon as there would be a will of the people of Ukraine, Poland would be the first to approve it and recognize independence of Ukraine. And that we talked a little bit in a conspiracy in Davos, and that's what we delivered as soon as the referendum took place. So referendum was on the 1st. We sent immediately so-called Clarice to the ministry with our vote of recognition. So that time was good. Now it's much more difficult, and I think that people who hope that peace will be a solution to all the problems facing Ukraine due to the invasion of Russians, I think are a little bit too optimistic. I think that the Russians understood only the language of power, and so rather you should answer the fire with the fire, and Ukraine, that's why it's important that will stand supported by the allies. And I'm very happy that also the president of Poland, Nawrocki, sent a very nice and warm letter to Ukraine, giving our strong commitment and emphasizing that we are a staunch supporter of independent Ukraine, and we recognize the role of Ukraine and contribution to the peaceful development of Europe in the future.
I want to pick up on what you mentioned there, that people shouldn't be so sure about what happens after a peace deal with Russia or any kind of a deal. In 2014, you, and I quote, said, "The problem with Russia is that Russians refuse the ideals that we recognise as the foundation of our system." Do you still believe that? And how can we expect Vladimir Putin to ever strike a peace deal when that is the case?
Yes, well, for Vladimir Putin, it's not a problem to strike a deal. It's a problem to stick to the deal, because all the promises regarding disarmament in the past, or anti-nuclear treaties, or I forgot the full name of that treaty, was continuously breached by the Russians. Then, if you remember, in Budapest in 1994, Russians, together with the Americans, they promised guaranteed Ukraine territorial integrity as long as they hand over nuclear weapons which they inherited from the Soviet Union days. And those guarantees are today openly questioned by Russians. So that's why I'm a bit pessimistic that even that kind of guarantees, which are not really based by strong presence, and they are not like it was introduced many years ago, 70, I think, more or less, in South Korea, when with the ceasefire and demarcation between southern and northern Korea, there was, I think, more than 60,000 of American soldiers, and that was at that time very good and guarantee which stands up today.
Should Poland be part of that guarantee in the form of troops on the ground, peacekeeping troops in Ukraine?
I'm not sure if you should call it peacekeeping. I think simply Ukraine should be a member of the Western family. That's why minimum for me is to facilitate as soon as possible the process of negotiations, accession to the European Union, and the Hungarians should withdraw a veto against that process, and that's a minimum. Then we should maybe have more in the future, but in the same time, I think it's very important to continue strong, not only financial, but also military support to Ukraine, which was also to some extent guaranteed today, where some ministers of defense of Sweden and Canada promised to continue delivery of weapons and facilitate self-defense of Ukraine. So fire sounds better for me sometimes than words.
So to be clear, if a deal is struck, following that deal, whatever the troops might be called, do you think Poland has a place sending troops to Ukraine to ensure the peace is kept, or ensure that, as you say, Vladimir Putin keeps to that deal?
Yeah, well, if we hear the incumbent Polish politicians from the ruling party or from the opposition or from the president, they are not convinced that the most important for the Polish military is to serve in that kind of a peacekeeping or...
Do you think Poland should?
Well, it depends how much we will be engaged in the future, because we were number one in the world as far as the financial assistance, military assistance, humanitarian assistance was concerned. Today, I think the enthusiasm among the Polish voters is smaller, is weaker, which is probably reflected by some of politicians, and it's a subject of concern for me, because Ukrainians are doing incredibly important work, let's call it like that, or hard job for Europe, because they stand for the fundamental value of European peace, which is that the territorial integrity is important and should never be broken.
And so you think that there could be a place, given Poland has been such a big supporter of Ukraine, there could or should be a place for troops to be on the ground in Ukraine in some form with other allies?
Well, I think we could provide training, but maybe what they are saying, that the minimum is that the hub, which is in Rzeszów, Jesionka, is really functional, that we could deliver weapons through Poland. And also, I think for our own security, we need even closer cooperation with Ukrainians, because you push me for words of concern. What worries me a little bit is when I hear that the Swedish Minister of Defense or Canadian are happy that they could cooperate in military manufacturing with Ukrainians and learning from the skills the Ukrainians learned from the battlefield. And I think that would be also good if we could even tighten our military cooperation with Ukrainians as soon as possible.
Former Polish Prime Minister Jan Krzysztof Bielecki, thank you again for your time.
Thank you very much indeed.
And that's all for World News Tonight. Do stay with us here on TVP World. I'm Aaron Darman. Goodbye for now.